Good afternoon, or good morning. I am Tracy Sinclair, and with me is David Bernknopf. He is our producer for the investigative team here at Alaska's News Source. And I wanted to just spend a little bit of time with David today because he has been intensely focused on this Brian Smith murder trial. Began earlier this week. Obviously, there's no court on Friday, so we have a little bit of a break today. But really just wanted to kind of get some people caught up if we haven't been if they haven't been able to watch the live stream that we have going every day. So,
and we had an unexpected development yesterday afternoon, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, it's kind of been a little different than I was expecting, at least. So let's talk just quickly about what is Brian Smith on trial for.
Yeah, it's important to remember the victims here, his alleged victims, but there's no question 2 women were murdered. 2 Alaska Native women, Kathleen Jo Henry and Veronica Abowchuk. One was apparently asphyxiated, the other was apparently shot in the head. The reason I say apparently is that the autopsies cannot be 100% certain given the condition of the remains, but that is the charge.
And so he has been charged with both of those murders.
Both of those murders, which occurred more than 5 years ago.
And so now we get to this week. We spent the first day and a half doing jury selection. You sat through that. Were there any surprises, any interesting questions that they were asking? Kind of what was the feel they were looking for in the jury?
The most common question related to whether people thought they could handle what is expected to be some very gruesome, disturbing evidence, and that is videos and still images allegedly of murders taking place. And there were some jurors who didn't think they could do that. Now, that's not necessarily an automatic, okay, go home. There's a process. And it's interesting for people who haven't seen the process, but it takes hours to pick a jury, and it took them a day and a half of court time to do it. And then they had opening statements from the prosecutor and the defense on Tuesday afternoon.
And so you spoke a little bit about it. You mentioned the videos. That's sort of what got all this going was the SD card. You've probably heard about it. SD card labeled homicide at downtown Marriott, I believe is what it says. How did that come about? This set a whole bunch of stuff off in motion.
What we had been told, what papers had shown that had been filed as part of this trial, was that an anonymous Samaritan had found an SD card on the street outside the Midtown Town Place Marriott, and that SD card said murder at Marriott. And until last Friday, and then in court when the witness appeared, that was largely the story we were told. But what we heard on Wednesday, was a woman named Valerie Kassler, was the one who found the SD card, allegedly.
That's Valerie.
That's Valerie. Right. Valerie did not really find an SD card. What she testified to is that she was using drugs and drinking with Brian Smith. They drove around. Prostitution was discussed. She never confirmed it on the stand, but that's what the defense and the prosecution seemed to believe happened. She was definitely with him, what she called a date. He went to get cash out of an ATM. She now says she stole his phone, took it with her when she left. She was living in a tent in the woods. She looked at the video, was shocked when she found these gruesome images, showed it to a friend of hers. The friend said, throw that away, get rid of it. You don't want to have anything to do with this. She says under oath, that's not what she did. She went to a therapist who was helping her deal with her substance abuse issues and told the therapist, and the therapist said, we have got to call the authorities. She then made a copy, she says, of the images, lost the phone, she says, by tripping in the woods at night, and the phone went flying. Under cross-examination, she got angry when asked about that. But that's the story, and then the police take this SD card, which is where she had moved the images. They do not have the original phone. So there are many questions about how that happened, and the defense really went after her pretty hard on Thursday about what she did with that phone, how she moved the images. It's definitely a kind of hazy story she told, and she got quite upset with the cross-examination at times. At one point saying, "You're trying to mess my S up," and but what the defense has not done yet, because it's not really appropriate yet, they may get to it, is question what those images actually are.
So we haven't actually seen the video or the images. I believe that was set for yesterday on the trial, and you were talking about an unexpected event. Yesterday afternoon or late morning, done for the day. You guys were down in the courtroom.
We were in the courtroom.
What happened?
The prosecutor, Brittany Dunlop, and her assistant prosecutor had been presenting evidence from people who worked at the Marriott Hotel to prove that Brian Smith was in fact in the hotel where the murder allegedly took place. They had presented, I get confused with her first name, Valerie Kassler. They had presented her to introduce how they acquired the images. But what they did not do was show how the police then took those images and what they did with it. So when they were going to begin planning on showing the video from the phone, the defense objected and said, "Wait a minute, Your Honor. They haven't shown chain of custody, they haven't explained what they did with these images, and they need to do that before they show it to the jury." The prosecutor said, "No, we'll get to that next week, trust us. We have witnesses who will testify to that." And the defense argued, "Your Honor, if you were to decide later that that information can't come in, those images can't come in, the jury can't unsee them." The prosecutor argued, "Don't worry, it'll all be okay." And the judge said, "No, let's take a deep breath. I'm sending the jury home." Called the jury in. He said, "All I can tell you folks is we're having a legal discussion here. You can go home for the weekend. We'll be back on Monday." And then, I don't know if we have the sound with the judge, but you can hear the judge says, "Maybe we'll still see the video, but today is not the day."
Okay, so this is what
Judge Kevin
Saxby says yesterday.
The reason I'm making the ruling I am is that there needs to be, I think it needs the chain of custody and the way the videos appear now, the information about whether for the jury to conclude about whether there's been any additions, subtractions, alterations, etc., should be part of the foundation that's laid here.
And so that is, as he said, it's part of the foundation that is laid here, so that they kind of, I guess, having not experienced a lot of trials, I wasn't expecting this, but it is really a step-by-step. We got the phone call from Valerie, we picked up the disc, we did this with it.
We looked at it, here's what we determined, it wasn't altered, this is the date that's stamped on it.
And those are the things that we didn't get to, was like, I watched for a little bit, and I watched the police officer say that, yes, she called me, I knew her from other events, and I got the SD card, but basically what the prosecution needs to show now is, once we got the card, what did we do with it before we got to this point?
It's called foundational evidence. It's technical, but it has to be done. I'll give you another example where they did lay the foundational evidence. They brought in a bookkeeper from the Marriott hotel chain to testify that she was the person who found and turned over the receipt from Brian Smith's hotel stay. Then they introduced the document. So they couldn't just say, "Here's his hotel receipt." They had to have somebody say, "Yes, this is a real hotel receipt." Now they have to go back, do that on Monday. Here's what we did with the video. Someone saw the video, because the police officer, the detective, initially, all they testified to was that they took this card from her. They never testified that they saw anything on it. So that has to be laid out. The judge clearly indicated, if it's as you say, prosecution will look at the video, but that has to be done. It's a technical thing, but it has to be done.
And this video, we're expecting this to be fairly graphic and explicit. Now, we have not seen it. We've only heard the prosecution tell us what it is.
We've heard a description from the prosecution. We've also read what the judge wrote about it because he looked at it prior to the trial to make an initial ruling on whether it could be admissible, and he did say it could be admissible. I think if you cover a few trials, you know that can be some distance between what a document says will be seen versus what is actually seen and heard. But what we're told is it will be quite graphic of a man's voice promising to kill somebody, strangling that person using apparently a wire to do it, repeatedly striking the victim, and then moving the body. We don't expect in this first video that Mr. Smith's face will be seen, just a voice. And it's not clear from the video that we'll know who the victim is, that it will be clear that the victim is Ms. Henry. That's not clear. So it's very important. It's one thing for a prosecutor to say something in opening statements. It's another thing when the evidence actually comes in. And one important thing about this is, as of, again, on Monday afternoon, on Monday when they show it, we're not expecting to be able to see it. They're going to set up the courtroom so that the monitors face the jury and not the gallery of people who are in court to watch, including us. We will hear it, we will see people's reactions to it, but the judge's ruling right now could be subject to change, but his ruling right now is that it's so hard to watch that it shouldn't be seen by the general public at this stage.
Oh, that is worrisome. So we'll have to see how that goes. You have been in the courtroom every day since this began. What's the atmosphere of people? Is it a crowded room? I haven't seen really what's going on in the gallery.
There's been family of Veronica Abowchuk. They've been there. There have been a handful of other observers. There's been obviously some media. It hasn't been a packed courtroom. The jury and the 4 alternates, so there's 16 jurors listening right now. In case something happens to a juror, they don't have to start all over again. They move an alternate in. They've been attentive, they take notes, but there has yet to be, as I've watched them, any particular reaction to anything. Mr. Smith sits there for the most part, sometimes nods his head, pays attention, not any terribly animated reaction from him. Sometimes he turns around to see who's in the courtroom. He sent a letter, 11-page letter yesterday to our reporter, Rebecca Palsha, in which he claims many of his rights are being violated. He does talk about that SD card, those images, and how we should be doing more investigation into that. It's not unlike letters from accused that you receive in any newsroom. There are often people saying their rights have been violated, and sometimes they have been. But there's no great information in the letter that changes anything in terms of the trial, no bombshells or, hey, wait till Thursday, you're going to see some real crazy stuff happen. Nothing like that.
And so we begin back again on Monday. 8:30 is when court begins. Now, just experience from this past week, it has started a little bit later each day. There's usually some housekeeping work that they don't put onto the live stream. We are live streaming the entire trial, so even if we don't see the videos, it is likely that the live stream will have the audio similar to what people in the courtroom will be able to see.
Right. And I would say, I know we're warning people, I've been told by the prosecutor that it's horrific.
Okay,
that's her description of it, that, you know, if you're going to watch the live stream, be prepared for that. And again, there are no guarantees that that's what will happen. What we find over and over again is, as you said, there's some housekeeping at 8:30, they bring the jury in maybe 8:45, 9 o'clock. Someone could be sick and court's postponed for the day. They could have another legal argument for 3 hours over the video. I don't expect it to go smoothly because it's very important to the defense. If they want to have success in this case, to keep those images in the video from the jurors' eyes.
So this is going on. We expect at least another 2 weeks of this trial.
At least.
And maybe a little bit more. So we will keep track on this. We'll be following the story. You can catch a kind of a wrap-up story over the weekend as well.
Sunday after the Super Bowl, I believe, in the newscast.
So you'll want to check that out. And we, of course, as I said, we'll be back here Monday morning at 8:30 is when we'll kind of be ready for court to start. And then we'll kind of follow along as the court goes. Again, gavel-to-gavel coverage with the Brian Smith murder trial. Thank you so much for joining us here on Alaska's News Source.